Hello, kids. Coach Crouch here. This is Human Geography of Africa. We'll touch on a little bit of everything. Sit back and enjoy the show. Population. Africa has the highest birth rate in the world. It's a lot. Okay, children under 15 compose of almost half of the population compared to that United States, which is 22%, Germany 18%. The women average 6 children. That's a lot. They have a low life expectancy, mostly because of the lack of medicines and hospitals and things of that nature. By 2050, the projected population of Africa is 2 billion people. That's a lot of folks, especially with the lack of medicines, foods, things of that nature. Those problems that they're going to have, again, food, water shortages, not enough to take care of 2 billion people. You can see the map here to the right has the population density. Obviously, the heavy dark colors are the more densely populated areas, with the heavy red up there on the Mediterranean coast. Here's the Nile River. Okay, so you can see how the red areas are the more heavily populated places. East Africa, the cradle of humanity. Olduvai Gorge in northern Tanzania has yielded fossils from 65 hominids. We're talking about old school, old people. We're talking about cradle of humanity, the beginnings of civilization, beginnings of humans as we are known today. Continental crossroads. East Africa is where early civilizations developed. Axum, modern-day Ethiopia, a very important trading center in the 100 ADs, and also others that we'll talk about here in a little bit. Deforestation and overuse of soil reduced the population of this big-time trading center, and by 1300, many trading cities along the east coast of Africa have developed. Kilwa was the most important. Colonization. In the 19th century, again 1800s, European countries began to become interested in raw materials in Africa. So instead of going down there and every European country competing for these places, they decided to have a conference. They call it the Berlin Conference. They made rules up in dividing Africa amongst themselves. The funny thing is, it's not really funny, I guess, is that no African country or ruler was allowed or invited to go to the Berlin Conference. It was all European countries talking about how to divide up Africa with zero African representation. Any European country could claim land in Africa if it told the other countries and showed that they controlled the area. Boundaries were set without regard to ethnic groups or language. They were just set up basically at Europeans' disposal, however they wanted to do it, and with no regard to local customs or traditions. By 1914, only Liberia and Ethiopia were free of European control. That means the rest of Africa was under the control of Europeans, all to exploit raw materials and make money. None of it helped the local African population. Here's a map right here that kind of shows you how they were divided. Belgium in the yellow, France in orange, Germany in red. That kind of shows you how Africa was divided up amongst the Europeans. Great Britain in this light color right here, and the grays are two countries that remained independent. By the 1970s, most of Africa had gained its independence. However, internal disputes and civil wars became serious problems because the colonial powers, these countries which up and left, did not prepare East African nations and others in Africa for independence. The boundaries that were created by Europeans forced cultural divisions that were not there before. They forced these groups to have to live together within a certain boundary because the Europeans created this way, and that's going to cause conflict. Internal conflicts among all the native peoples because of the Europeans and how they divided the continent. Rwanda is a great example of the civil wars that took place because of European colonization. Germany and Belgian colonial governments aggravated the tense relations between two groups, the Hutu and the Tutsi, This is what we're going to watch, Hotel Rwanda. That's what the movie's about, this right here. In 1994, Hutu extremists took advantage of unstable government and racial tensions and basically went after and tried to get rid of all Tutsi people. Between 500,000 and 1 million Tutsi and moderate Hutu were murdered within 3 months. That is a ton of people in a short period of time. The international community, including the United States, did not do much, if at all, to help Rwanda or the groups like the Tutsi. Today, things that bring in money, farming, tourism, wildlife parks in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania are all world famous. Tons of game reserves where you can go see these exotic animals and hunt some of these animals. People from other parts of the world go there to hunt, to do it for trophies. Africans do it for survival. It's a great source of income, and it allows them to try to use a resource to their benefit. The Serengeti Plain is in Tanzania, and you can see tons of wildlife in this area. It's one of the more popular places to go for a safari. Healthcare issues. AIDS is the most critical health problem in East Africa and most of Africa. It's become a pandemic. Some countries could lose 10 to 20% of their population. The education on AIDS is increasing. However, the scope of the disease is probably not known, and most of it hidden. Other diseases, cholera, malaria, you can read the others. Ebola virus, obviously, is big of late, but the AIDS epidemic is very big. President Bush did a lot as far as sending money and aid and education opportunities on AIDS to these African countries. Here's a demographic showing you AIDS, HIV and AIDS viruses and the numbers. Zimbabwe, Botswana, 20% of the adult population has HIV. You can see the numbers here. People with HIV in the dark color, more than 2 million. So you can kind of tell. Most of Africa, south of the Sahara especially, is dealing with the HIV/AIDS epidemic. West Africa, trade is a big part of West Africa. The hub of slave trade came out of West Africa. The country of Benin was built on slave trade. Egypt had slaves for thousands of years. The earliest external slave trade was across the Sahara in the 10th century. Later, kings who defeated other tribes sold their captives for rum, cookware, and livestock. Most of the slave trade, the slaves that were sold into slavery in the Americas, into the European area, were sold by other Africans. Those tribes who had fought a conflict and won, any captives they had would then be sold to others for a profit. That's how a lot of the slave trade worked. Not all of it, but a lot of it. Some big trading empires in West Africa, Ghana, salt and gold, and Mali. Conquered Ghana, promoted agriculture, reestablished gold and salt trade. They kind of died out at the end of the Ghana period. And then Songhai replaced that later on. Trade is important in West Africa, dependent on sale of its products, how the economy works, on the biggest part of its trade. Ghana has strong gold and diamond exports, as well as other mineral resources. Problems like civil war and other things have caused Ghana to kind of be set back as far as their economics are concerned, even though they have some of the resources to be successful. Sierra Leone is one of the worst economic conditions in West Africa. Was once one of the world's highest quality diamonds as far as production, but political instability, wars, uneducated people all caused Sierra Leone to fall backwards in terms of their economy. Central Africa, the Bantu migrations. Around 2000 BC, Bantu people moved southward. They're coming out of the deserts and running south. On their way, they spread their language and culture. That's called cultural diffusion. As any groups of people move from one place to the other, they're going to spread their culture. Today, about 120 million Africans speak one of the Bantu languages. 15th century Portuguese established the island of Sao Tome as the initial base for trade in African captives. the rulers of Africa, like I just said a minute ago, took part in the trade, and they'd already been selling other Africans and Arabs throughout the years. Uh, the Europeans coming in, just a new consumer, basically. Again, colonialism, the borders they impose on the locals cause huge problems, put ethnic groups together that shouldn't have been together, causing tons and tons of violence, especially once the Europeans left. Southern Africa. Europeans migrated to South Africa in the 17 and 1800s, competed with many native ethnic groups for control of the land. But the British defeated Zulu and Dutch and formed the Union of South Africa in 1902. In 1948, a white minority government instituted a policy of apartheid, which is a complete separation of races. It's like segregation here in the United States. They banned social contact between blacks and whites, segregated schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods. Blacks made up 75% of the population, but only received a small portion of the land. The apartheid policy is very similar to segregating in the South. Everybody had separate things. In 1912, the African National Congress was formed. In 1949, Nelson Mandela became the leader of the ANC. He led the struggle to end apartheid, and because of the things he did, was put in prison. In the 1980s, nations urged South Africa to end apartheid, and in 1989, President F.W. de Klerk wanted change. The government then ended apartheid laws, and in 1994, Mandela won an election, this is after he was released from prison, and became president of South Africa. 96 had a new constitution guaranteeing the rights of all citizens. The apartheid policy hurt South Africa, sanctions by other countries, the poor education of the majority of the population. It was very difficult. It hurt them in the long run. Two economies ended up coming together. The upper middle class had all the nice things, great cities, industries, and then you had the poverty area, farms, small townships full of black people who didn't get an opportunity to get educated or work in the nicer places, all added up to terrible economic growth for South Africa. And here we have AIDS again in South Africa, or Southern Africa. By 1999, most severe AIDS infected countries in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, more than 25% of the adults were infected. The life expectancy in 1994 was 60. Fast forward 5 more years and it drops to 39. That tells you how big of a deal this epidemic is. There you go. Human Geo. It's a little bit long, I understand that, but it's worth a lot of points. So, see ya.